Everybody. Welcome to episode 17 of HOU.SEC.CON, the accompanying podcast for HOU.SEC.CON. So Michael Farnham, unfortunately is not with us today, but even he deserves a day off every once in a while, and that happens to be today. So I'm going to be your host and the only host today, and hopefully I carry through with enough momentum here to keep you all interested. But looking forward to having Michael on our next one. So a couple things just briefly on HOU.SEC.CON before we launch in. There's a few things. First of all, HOU.SEC.CON I wanted to mention. So that's the OT.SEC.CON. We have a great agenda lining up. It's all being confirmed and putting up on the. So check the website. We're putting it up on the website. Lauren's doing a great job capturing all that. We have a great debate with a couple gentlemen from CP Chem. So ConocoPhillips, Chevron Phillips Chemical. Very good about OTIT. And then we have a great panel that's joining us from some very smart guys from BP. We also have a couple of other things. Hopefully we'll have that wrapped up with the keynotes that I'm excited about to wrap it up, and we'll have that up on the agenda here very soon as well. Tickets are actually sold out, but we raised the limit a little bit so that we could get some more folks in. There's been an enormous amount of interest, so that's been fantastic. Thank you everybody for helping spread the word. This is going to be a really exciting conference. So be sure to get your tickets. They will sell out. We are going to cap it just so we have this inaugural year more manageable. And as we see what we do and any of the success rate, gauge the success rate, we'll make this bigger and better next year and years to follow, which I'm confident we'll see happen. The other part is HOU.SEC.CON, the user group. Our next one is in April. That's the last Thursday of April. Be sure to sign up for that one. We have the biohacker Len No that's going to be there speaking, so that'll be a lot of fun. If you've seen Len before at HOU.SEC.CON, he's had keynotes before, etc. But some really interesting things around hacking from a biotechnology perspective. So be sure to join us then. And with that, that's pretty much all the announcements I had. I'd like to introduce our guest for today. It's Roya Gordon. Welcome, Roya.
Hey, thanks for having me, Sam. Happy to be here.
Awesome. You and I have known each other for a little bit, so looking forward to some continued discussion. And obviously, given both our backgrounds, we're probably going to be leaning a little bit towards OT on this podcast today, right? So one of the things that we usually do, we start with an article. And the article that I wanted to bring up happens to be from somebody that I know well that through dark reading, and this is Southern Company that has actually done an SBOM for substations, and it was a presentation that was done at S4 by Alex Wakis, and it was an article that basically detailed doing an SBOM in a substation. Roya, what do you think about that high level to start?
Yeah, so I read the article, very interesting. I feel like Southern Company, they're one of the most advanced or mature organizations out there. I've been in this space for a while, not like compared to everyone else that's been in this space for like 30 years, but going on 10 years now. And I remember them and a couple other utilities starting out with the asset inventory and the threat intelligence. And now to kind of see them getting ahead of the curve and actually becoming more mature than vendors, saying, hey, we want to SBOM and we think this is the next level of cybersecurity. I felt like a proud mom, like, oh, the industry is learning, asset owners are getting it, right? But the first thing that came to mind was at a previous company I worked at, we found a vulnerability in an open source language library. And we realized like, okay, well, there's really no way to report this because the NVD, it gives you the process to report it to like an OEM, but in an open source language library, it's maintained by the community. No one really owns it. So we're going through this process of trying to hunt down the maintainer, saying, hey, this is a big deal because a lot of IoT, but more importantly, IIoT, the industrial Internet of Things, they use this language library and they're the ones connected to our OT environments. So anyways, the conclusion that NVD had was, hey, we can't, fix this. We can't get in contact with the maintainer. We have to report this vulnerability anyway. And it's very dangerous to do that when there's not a fix. You're pretty much telling the world, this is the flaw. this is what threat actors can do, and then there's no fix following up. So, but obviously we had to report it because that's what you have to do. You have to let asset owners know that there's this major flaw and maybe they could implement a workaround. But if we had an SBOM, I'm like, that would have probably solved the problem because asset owners would know what devices they had that were using the language library. And, I was on some projects with CISA where that was going to be the next step of, trying to report vulnerabilities. How do you report it for open source language libraries? How does this tie into SBOMs? But yeah, unfortunately, not at that company anymore. And I'm not really sure how they closed that loop, but that's one of the things I thought about when reading this. So really good on Southern for kind of taking that leap and kind of leading the charge with asset owners saying, "Hey, SBOM needs to be a requirement."
Yeah, and I think it's really generous too that they describe their own project. I mean, a lot of the stuff, use cases are the easiest to digest for anybody when you're wandering into this stuff. And when you talk about SBOM, which is needed, for those of us that have been doing this a while, we're still struggling with getting asset discovery and inventory and all that stuff tracked. And so now we're taking another step deeper. So how do you manage that at the end of the day? So you get all this data. And then I have always said, and I think we've talked about on previous podcasts at some point, but I liken it. So Farnham and I at one point were working on in application security for a little bit together, overlapping at one point. And that was what the big argument is. Nobody learns to code securely. You learn to code. And so, these mistakes are going to continuously happen until we understand how to code securely. And it's almost, the secure by design argument, right, from the ground up. But then we take this SBOM, which is a great idea, and then understanding what are they, and many of these OEMs don't even know what they have. We're constantly finding, and at the company I work for, day job, we're constantly finding that they don't know what protocols they have, what different, they don't have a good inventory of their own user manuals and things like that because of so many years of acquiring other technologies, right, and growing and end of lifing some things and bringing out new products. So that makes it equally even more complicated at the end of the day, right?
Yeah. I honestly think that this is going to change the game, especially with Southern saying that they're going to relook and change their contracts. If vendors can't provide them with an SBOM, they have to rethink some things. So I'm like, what does this mean for the future? There's already roadblocks when it comes to legal and regulatory compliance, and will this be another one? But I am excited to see them move towards this 2.0, where they're trying to automate the SBOM, and I saw they're collaborating with a whole bunch of other organizations and asset owners to make that happen. So I'm really excited to kind of see where this goes. But yeah, it was really good to kind of see that they were even looking into SBOMs. I was at S4 last year and I remember the conversation and the SBOM pavilion and the workshop, and just to see that people actually paid attention and they walked away with starting a project based off that. That was really good. It means that we're doing these conferences for a reason, right? People aren't just showing up and listening and walking away like nothing has happened. They're walking away with some action items. So
And that, yeah, absolutely, totally agree with you. The only thing I always think about, and I think I may have said it already, but the running before we can walk, right? I mean, a lot of times it still feels like we're getting over our skis a little bit, but that's the old crotchety me that's starting to form from doing this for a while, and even I need to say, okay, take a step back, let's look at what happens next, so that we can get it, an advanced look and prepare for that as we do things like regular asset discovery and inventory and things like that. How do you include SBOM as part of that process, right? And how does that help you, tackle fundamentals? But yeah, I mean, you're right. If we're, on top of that, if we're not attending these conferences and not getting anything out of them, what's the point?
yeah. And I'm starting to kind of see this hierarchy of maturity. So obviously starting with like the asset inventory, that's the basics. And then from there you can do your threat intelligence and your vulnerability management. Then from there it's like that physical layer monitoring, right? Where you can do like configuration change management, obsolescence management. And then I think that next level of maturity might be the SBOMs. I think, it's still very new, it's more nuanced, but I think organizations are eventually going to get there, and they're kind of setting the pace.
Great. So that will wrap this part of the discussion up to start with. And that article's out of dark reading. We'll link in the show notes. But please take a look at that whenever you get a moment. and then we are going to take a quick break with some awesome music, and then we will be right back. Welcome back to episode 17. So we have Roya Gordon here with us, and we're going to talk a little bit about, Roya, we typically come up and ask our guests to come up with something they want to talk about, and sometimes it's the talk they had at HOU.SEC.CON or something that they presented before or something they're passionate about. And Roya brought up some suggestions, and with the ones that hit me the most, obviously at the core, because of just the birth of HOU.SEC.CON to begin with, was building the community in Houston, and of course going deeper into the OT side of things with that, right? Hence HOU.SEC.CON and things like that we're trying to do, which I love. And so, Roy, tell me on the surface, like what's your experience been? Whether that's in Houston or in the industrial side of things, like what's your experience been with community and how it's evolved?
So I've only been living in Houston for 5 years, but I moved here specifically for the critical infrastructure space, the energy space, doing OT cybersecurity. And there's been times I thought of leaving. I'm from Miami and Jamaica, so I'm like, I'll be close to home. If I move back to Miami, I can go to Jamaica and see my parents and my family. And then I realized, like, I have no community there. Like, yes, we know S4 happens there once a year, but there's really no OT security community in Miami. And when I would visit, I would try to go to like security meetups, and they're all talking about like, blockchain and Forex, and they're not talking about security, right? They're talking about broader tech. And that's when I realized that Houston just really is a special place when it comes to this community. And that's why I'm happy that you're doing HOU.SEC.CON. And even when you did HOU.SEC.CON last year, how you created that ICS track, because the people are here, the headquarters are here, the asset owners are here, all sorts of industries, especially IoT with like medical, the biggest med center in the US with medical devices. It just seems to be such a hub. And I feel like we're just now starting to cultivate this community, obviously with what you're doing. And then I'm seeing a whole bunch of other conferences pop up. So like HOU.SEC.CON, HOU.SEC.CON, CS4CA, API. I know Derek and CSA, they're going to be doing something here too. And it's just like, okay, we're finally building this community. And we're kind of branding ourselves as the OT ICS security hub of the US. No one has officially said it yet, but I say it in my mind all the time because it's true, right? You can agree to that.
Yeah, been here in Houston going up on 27 years now, and obviously, if you don't have line of sight into oil and gas, you probably are heads down and never left your house. So yeah, it is definitely that, right? Fortunately, very diverse as well from a economic perspective. Different industries. You mentioned medical, large medical center.
Yeah.
Um,
Plus, I do
and
want to add the fact that I know we'll go to different conferences and we don't really get a lot of asset owner presence because it's expensive, right? To travel, for hotel, the tickets, and the fact that we can get asset owners right here in our backyard that could just drive to the conference. I'm like, that is to me the bread and butter because we're not trying to do this in a silo. Like, it's good to build this community amongst ourselves, and it's good to see each other again. It's a family reunion, but we're really here for the asset owners. And it makes no sense to keep doing this if we're not including them in the conversation. So I think Houston just makes it easier for them to show up and to be a part of it. Because I have some friends that are, asset owners. We all do. And they say, man, I wish I could go, but it's expensive. So it's like, well, there's a couple here in Houston. What's the excuse now?
and it's kind of unfortunate too. Like, and I agree with you totally on this, but it's kind of unfortunate too if you work for somebody that's not willing to invest in you to be able to go to these conferences and learn, right? Now, self, out of self-interest here, right? There's part of the reason we have HOU.SEC.CON, right? And we've designed HOU.SEC.CON and all these other things is because we know that's an issue. We want to make it available to everybody. So, the ticket prices being low and all that other stuff, we want it to be available to everybody. This is not about us, trying to create a profit center. This is us creating a community. And that goes out the bounds of just that piece too. Like, we're trying to bring in new talent, right? There's talent that's lacking. How do you build it? Well, we build it here locally in our own backyard and try to bring it into scope. Like, I love to see it when We have occasionally you'll get a student, that comes in from one of the universities and wants to do a presentation. That's awesome. That's fantastic. And to bring them in and welcome into to something that's super important, is something we should be doing anyway, because as much focus is going on OT, it doesn't seem like we're doing a lot to staff up and address that need. Right.
Yeah, which, I know someone posted it on their LinkedIn recently, and there was a lot of people commenting on, you know, it's like this perceived growth in OT or in security. I know people reach out to me. They're like, I want to get into security because you seem to be great. You always have a job. You weren't affected by the pandemic. And I'm like, you don't know what's going on the inside. There's all these ebbs and flows. There's layoffs, but then there's hiring. And it's a little crazy, but I really think that and this is a little bit off topic, but I really do think that with the new SEC rules, that's going to like start to drive hiring again, because they're going to be looking to professionals to say, hey, we got to comply with these SEC rules. We have to do risk management. We have to build up our cybersecurity program and cybersecurity governance. How do we do that? They're going to be turning to NIST, but they're looking for professionals to help guide them along the way. And, I kind of think we're probably going to see a growth. So now we can start to foster and train and mentor those people trying to come up into the field. But I know for a while, especially when I got laid off last year, and I'm like, I don't know what to tell you all. I don't know what advice to give you because I'm laid off right now and I wasn't expecting it. So yeah, excited to see the growth and the new faces in the space for sure, especially in OT security specifically, because it's so niche. No one really knows what it is. So the fact that people are interested in being in our space, it's like, yes, welcome you with open arms.
Yeah, and there have been layoffs across the board, and I think the other thing that aside from the fact it's a horrible situation for anybody, it's just terrible. But I think you're right. Some of the SEC stuff, but also the cycles of what we see in the economy with oil and gas, things like that. These folks at these large oil and gas companies, they know exactly when the next downturn's coming for them. They have the risk already programmed, and they know what that looks going to look like. And so a lot of times you can look at what's going on there, and it doesn't necessarily have to be hiring in cyber. It could be other roles. You can start seeing that uptick again. And I think
Yeah.
we're close to it again. We'll see some, hopefully, fingers crossed. We're going to see a little bit more of that grow for a lot of different reasons this year. And so very, very positive about it. But yeah, it's a rough. It can be a rough time. And hey, I've been laid off. So I don't know anybody that hasn't been laid off at some point in their career.
Well, I just got my badge of honor last year, and I would not wish it on anyone. But I
Yeah,
realized more people were laid off than I thought, and they're just like, "Yeah, it's a part of life." And I was like, I
yeah.
just never thought it would happen. But yeah, it makes you stronger and all that in retrospect. So this brings me to another point of how there's indicators, like you said, in the oil and gas industry. There's indicators of upturn, downturn. I really feel like there's been a disconnect with VCs, venture capitalists, and what they're investing in and what's driving their investments, and then what the security community is doing, right? I go to these conferences and I never hear from VCs. And I think it's important because they're the ones, especially in our space, there's a lot of them backed by VCs, a lot of them aren't public. And it's just like, it would be good to kind of know what's driving their investments. And are they even knowledgeable? I'm sure they're getting advised by experts so that they can decide what's the best investment for them. I know some VCs, they invest in some ICS technologies, but they have a portfolio of 19 other technologies that they're investing in at the same time. They're getting into solar, and so I would really like perspective from them. I think we need to start inviting them, just like we're inviting the asset owners, we're inviting academia, we're inviting government. Let's invite the VCs. Let's see what they have to say. What are they seeing? Because it affects all of us.
You make a great point, and thank you for plugging without even knowing about it. HOU.SEC.CON that we're doing, which is in July. We actually have a panel of VCs that'll be talking about what they're seeing as what's next, right? And so that's exciting. But yeah, I agree. And I remember being at I want to say it was GridSecCon early on in the OT cyber days, and running into people from different big banks and other VCs that were looking for opportunities to invest, which I thought was kind of weird because I'd never really seen that at other conferences before, but it was kind of cool. I'm a startup guy. I've done 7 startups so far, so I get it, and I would like to see them part of it. To your point, so I guess the question there is, how do you get them? How do you get them interested to come in and do HOU.SEC.CON or OT.SEC.CON or any of these? Like, what do you? What's the point of interest there for them to come speak or come participate, and even just be there and listen?
I mean, but it helps them too, because if they're investing in this space, then now they get to understand what we're doing in the space. And, just what I like about, conferences is usually at the end, there's a little bit of forecasting. What do we expect to see? If we're doing this forecasting from our little cyber community, a VC would want to listen in on that because it kind of gives them insight into where their investments are going and do they believe in the forward trajectory of the technology, of new product features, of, we talked about SBOMs. That was talked about a year ago. Now there's projects, there's funding, and I feel like they could also find new funding opportunities as well in the space. So I think it would be like a win-win. It would just have to be pitched to them the right way. But I'm excited about HOU.SEC.CON and to listen in on that panel because they've just been in a silo for way too long, and especially with SVB, the bankruptcy and everything, and that just caused a ripple effect. I want to know what's going on. So
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. So no, and I will say that hopefully we'll get more interest from that, and it's a good point. We'll bring that up and be a little bit more targeted with who we try to invite here for HOU.SEC.CON for sure moving forward, because I would like to see it. There's a lot of there's a startup culture here in Houston. I mean, there are some great companies that were founded here, even in the OT space, right? And so there's no reason with all the talent we have here, this shouldn't become a really good hub for that. And I know there is, and especially a lot on the specific energy side, such as oil and gas applications, things like that may not be cyber related, but other
yeah,
technologies and applications,
OTS,
tooling. And
OTC, Offshore Technology Conference. That's a big one. There's a couple of really, really intellect. Yeah, so technology wise, maybe IT, but definitely OT is starting to build the OT security presence.
so, what do you think we're missing on the building that? From a community perspective, what do you think we're missing here in building out the OT community? What are the
You know,
opportunities, do you think?
yeah, you know what? I- So, as much as I've mentioned that there's all these conferences that are popping up, maybe more cohesion, right? Because maybe if there's all these different initiatives, but no one's really talking to each other, maybe that kind of it creates people have to decide, right? So it's the same audience, but it's just like, okay, should I go to this? Should I go to that? I already did that. I can't go to all of the conferences per year. I mean, I personally can. This is what I do, but maybe not everyone. So yeah, maybe just more collaborations, and I'm sure that you're doing that. Collaborating with like other conferences that are here. One thing I noticed that we don't have here is a B-sides, which I thought was interesting because I think I might go to B-sides NOLA because Naho, she's the one heading that up, and I'm like, wait, there's no B-sides here. But on the flip side, I think it might be conference overload.
Well, yeah, and we've tried to get that going. Anybody out there want to start B-sides? You have full support from HOU.SEC.CON in terms of helping with speakers and things like that. So there's been a couple starts on B-sides here in Houston, but it just hasn't been. I think we've had two of them in the past, and unfortunately, it's just fizzled out. So, but that's still an opportunity. So anybody out there, that's a call to action. Anybody listening, and you want to get involved and do a B-sides in Houston, hit us up. We're happy to help make that happen. Right. So we have
Yeah.
some resources we can help
But
with.
I also think, what do you think about meetups? I've been kind of seeing like monthly security meetups. Maybe that'll be too much because everyone's always traveling. Maybe quarterly, and then maybe people that are running the different conferences can come together and promote it. And it's like, okay, this is the one hub for everyone in Houston that's in OT security. I know you're always thinking about things, but have you thought of that? And I guess what
No,
was
and those are well, we started the Houston HOU.SEC.CON user group basically for that reason. We have one under our belt right now that we've done on, and we'll continue to do those monthly. But there's also a big InfraGard community here, right? And they have their meetings and things like that too. So, I think they're here. But to your point, there's so many of them. Which do you choose? Where do you go, right? Where do you find your people? And But it's an absolute. That's an interesting problem you bring up because it's true. There are probably quite a few things that are happening.
Yeah.
Several that that I don't go to, not just for sake of it. I travel to for my job, and I can't get to all of them. But yeah, there is probably more out there, and it does cause some confusion. So some sort of hub. I like the
Yeah,
way
or
you
like
said.
an annual. It could be biannual, annual, but it could at least be at least one time a year where InfraGard, they're bringing their members, a HOU.SEC.CON user group, the CS4 CA community, and everyone is like, you know what, this is the month that we're all going to do our meetups on the same day, same venue, pull together and make it a thing. And I don't know. I think that'll be a beautiful thing to see.
I think collaboration between the conferences would be warranted. It would benefit because at the end of the day, we should be focused on the user community, and we should be focused on building that out and helping, and that's what our mission should be. So, yeah, I mean, we're wide open for that. And anybody listening, if you're with another conference, hit us up. We're happy to talk, right? But those are really good points. So, yeah, I think a lot of good stuff there. Thank you, Roya, for being on with us today. You have any parting thoughts for everybody out there?
Yes, one more thing.
Yes.
I mean, I'm on here, but I can't just leave without a shameless plug, right? So, but we're talking about collaboration, and that's exactly what my talk on Wednesday will be about at CS4CA. So we know that the engineering teams and the cybersecurity teams are usually at odds, but I did some research and I realized that they have the same objectives and they're facing the same OT challenges, but they have different visibility in the OT environment. The cyber teams are focused on the network, and the engineering teams are focused on the physical processes. And there's technology that caters to each, but we have a customer that's pushing us to integrate with another OT security solution. And so the talk is about leveraging technology to make these two teams a dynamic duo, giving them the same visibility so that they can work together. So I'm really excited to share what we've been doing at this big chemicals company. And yeah, that's my plug. But no, I'm so happy that you brought me on. I'm happy to be here. I love talking about stuff, whether it's technical stuff or just community building, diversity and inclusion, being a woman in ICS, you name it. So thanks for having me.
We'll have more conversations in the future, I'm sure. Thank you again for being with us. And with that, I'll wrap it up. That's another episode. And hopefully see everybody on episode 18 next time with Michael Parno.